Okay, today we are going to talk about Chapter 5, Lesson 4, all about the Nubians, and then later they're called the Kush. Okay, so first of all, location. They are south of Egypt, and originally they were cattle herders, and then, of course, just like everywhere else, they eventually start to settle down into villages, and they do not, in this part of the country, rely as much on the Nile. The flooding is, they have rainfall all year, so they have fertile lands, and it's not quite as a worry. They live in the savannas, which makes sense why they were cattle herders, which, of course, you probably know the savannas are flat grasslands. And they were great hunters as well, and of course, originally with a bow and an arrow. Okay, and then eventually, as time goes on, those villages, the strong ones take over the weak ones, and they start to form kingdoms. So the kingdom here is called the Kingdom of Karma, and they became very wealthy from all their agriculture and mining of gold in that area, and they trade with Egypt. Okay, and they're also kind of a go-between the rest of tropical South Africa, and get some things from there to trade with Egypt. All right, and Egypt is really liking to trade with them. They have, of course, their cattle since they were herders, and they have that gold. They get incense and ivory, and then tropical animals like giraffes and leopards. They also get slaves from them. And the Egyptians also like to hire the Nubians for their army because they were so skilled in warfare. They also produce a lot of nice goods, jewelry and pottery and metal goods. Okay. The other thing is we see that they develop very similarly to Egypt. They have tombs for their kings as well. They're a little smaller, but the same idea where they're buried with their important things for the afterlife and their gems and golds and everything. Like their tombs had some amazing things as well. All right, so the Nubians get invaded eventually by the Egyptians. And this is around 14,000 BC. And they have a war for about 50 years. And then they control Nubia for about 700 years. Okay, and so you see an influence definitely from Egypt. A lot of the customs are adapted and taken into Nubian life, and the beliefs. They have a lot of the same gods. They adapt and bring the Egyptian gods, in with their own. They learn to use copper and bronze and make tools, and they even adapt some of their hieroglyphs with their own language and create an alphabet. So you see a big influence, of course, after 700 years on this kingdom. Okay, but by about the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, they got weak, and the Nubians are able to break away. So when they break away again, they are now called the Kush, okay, in the Kushite kingdom. And they get very powerful over time. They're getting very rich from these trade caravans that bring important things like ivory and things from the central part of the the continent. And they get quite wealthy. And eventually they decide they are going to try to challenge Egypt. And so they are going to govern from a city. Napata is their capital. And the king who decides to do this is Kashta. Kashta is the king who's going to decide to challenge Egypt. And he doesn't make it all the way. They got some of Egypt. They got up to Thebes. But his son Pi is actually the one who ends up fulfilling his dad's wish and actually conquering Egypt. Okay? And so once that's happening, the Kush are going to have a very, powerful kingdom for a while. You again see a lot of similarities. They've really admired the Egyptians, so they have these big white sandstone temples and monuments, very similar to Egypt. They have, they believe that the gods are, you know, giving the right to rule to their rulers. A lot of the customs are the same, but also you do see in their some of their clothing choices and their art, their influence of southern parts of Africa influencing them in those things. And so the elephant is actually one of their sacred animals, and you see that a lot in their art. So that is something that shows the influence of like their location. Okay. All right, and so they rule Egypt for a while, but also you see some really steeply sloped and smaller pyramids in their building, their architecture. Okay, so they rule for about 60 years, and they learn how to. They do really well until the Assyrians come in, and we've talked about the Assyrians before. And it's about 671. They come and they invade Egypt with their iron weapons, which we've talked about, and the Kush are of course defeated. They can't fight against them because they only have bronze weapons, and so they Kush retreat back to their original homeland, and they give up Egypt, and then also over time they learn how to use and make iron. So not only weapons, but they also use it for their agriculture. They're growing more food because they're now able to have iron plows and hoes and all of those things. So, you know, they did, of course, just like other places, end up learning from them. They wanted to protect themselves, though, from their whole being taken over by the Assyrians. So they retreated and made a new capital of themselves at Meroe. Now, Meroe is located on a cataract, and we talked about how cataracts help to make you more safe from attack right coming down the river. So that was smart of them to move their capital there. Also, in this area, there are large deposits of iron ore and plenty of trees that they can use to fuel the furnaces. So this becomes a huge iron production community, and they end up getting really wealthy from not only their iron, but also their trade center for a long time. And you see again a lot of similarities. Their architecture shows, Amun Ra, the god from the Egyptians, and the buildings are very similar, and their paintings and pyramids and a lot of the same things. Of course, they also have some differences, right? With the iron building, you're going to have furnaces, so there's smoke. There's something called slag, shiny black slag or waste from the iron around. But they also are going to become quite wealthy because of their interior Africa trade. They end up becoming great traders and go to faraway places. So they have things that other places want, right? Like leopard skins or valuable wood. And then they have slaves that they trade with outside places, and of course their iron products. So they trade with really faraway places like Arabia and India and China and Rome even. And you see some influence, like some of their buildings reflecting them knowing about places like Rome, like the Romans had public baths. And we see evidence of them building baths here too. So you see a lot of that. Also, they brought back things from the places like textiles, right? Having really finely woven cloth is something that they would bring back. So they become this huge trading kingdom for about 600 years until, unfortunately, eventually they're destroyed by a rival trading. Aksum was a kingdom on the Red Sea and on Eastern Africa, where today would be Ethiopia, and they became a major trading force, and they ended up conquering and destroying, conquering Kush and destroyed this city. Okay, so that was the end of this kingdom. So that is today talking about the difference between other places besides just Egypt, right? We're talking about the Nubian / Cush